Imagine watching live TV, and suddenly the most unexpected Hollywood meltdown erupts right in front of millions. One moment, Michael J. Fox is smiling on The View, and the next he's on his feet, furious, calling out Whoopi Goldberg in a way no one saw coming. The studio freezes, the audience gasps, and producers scramble as the situation spirals completely out of control. What happened next stunned everyone, and it changed the show forever. Asterisk, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss an update. Now, let's dive into what really happened. Asterisk, chaos, pure, electrifying chaos. That's the only word powerful enough to capture what erupted on The View when Hollywood icon Michael J. Fox found himself locked in a fiery, unexpected clash with Whoopi Goldberg. In seconds, a calm morning show transformed into one of the most jaw-dropping live TV disasters of the year. The audience gasped, the co-hosts froze mid-sentence, and the entire studio energy shifted as if a storm had suddenly blown in through the walls. And the most shocking part, it all started so harmlessly, so beautifully, so normal. The segment kicked off with the kind of warm nostalgia that only Michael J. Fox can bring. He walked onto the stage with that legendary smile, the same one that won over millions in Back to the Future and made him one of the most beloved stars of his generation. Even today, despite his long and difficult health journey, Michael radiated positivity. He waved, laughed, even cracked a joke before sitting down, instantly earning cheers from the crowd. For a moment, it felt like classic television magic, the kind you rarely see anymore, but beneath the surface, something felt different. There was a tension in the air that no one could quite explain. Maybe it was the topic of the interview. Maybe it was the mood of the hosts. Maybe it was the pressure of live TV. Or maybe it was fate aligning every spark for one explosive moment. Whoopi welcomed Michael warmly at first. She began by praising his career, his legacy, his strength. Michael responded graciously, speaking with humility and honesty. The conversation felt respectful, safe, and uplifting. But then, a subtle shift, a tone, a look, a question loaded with something heavier than the words themselves. People in the audience later said they felt the temperature drop. The co-hosts seemed to sense it. Joy Behar glanced sideways. Sunny Hostin paused with a half-smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. There was a silent understanding that whatever was about to happen wasn't going to be lighthearted, and then it happened. A question seemingly simple, but wrapped in layers of implications, sparked the first flame. Michael's expression changed instantly, just slightly, but enough for viewers at home to rewind the moment again and again. His smile tightened. His eyes shifted. His posture straightened. It was the look of a man who had been blindsided. Michael laughed it off politely, but the tremor was there. Whoopi pushed. Michael pushed back, and the studio atmosphere cracked open. Still, no one expected what was coming next, because, in the span of just a few seconds, the interview spiraled from friendly conversation into a high-pressure emotional collision. One that left the audience absolutely stunned. Gasps filled the studio like a wave rolling across the seats. Co-hosts exchanged glances that screamed, "This is not good." Even the producers, usually calm, collected, invisible, began motioning frantically off-camera, their headsets buzzing with frantic whispers and urgent commands. The entire control room lit up in flashing monitors and rising voices as the interviewer continued to fall apart in front of millions of viewers. You could feel it. You could see it. You could almost hear the heartbeat of the studio pounding through the speakers. It was unpredictable. It was explosive. It was the kind of live TV meltdown people would talk about for days. And the wildest part? This was only the beginning. Because what started as a simple, nostalgic chat with one of Hollywood's gentlest souls was about to become a full-blown confrontation. One powerful enough to send Michael J. Fox walking off the set, live, and leave Whoopi Goldberg in stunned silence. No script could have prepared anyone for what happened next. What followed next was the kind of TV moment that producers pray for and guests dread. Initially, everything moved smoothly. The hosts welcomed Michael J. Fox with warm applause, praising his iconic roles in Back to the Future, Family Ties, and his decades of advocacy for Parkinson's research. Michael responded with his usual charm, humble smiles, slow but confident speech, and a sense of humor that instantly lifted the room. For a while, it looked like this segment would be another wholesome, inspirational interview. The audience was leaning in, the hosts were engaged, and Michael seemed genuinely happy to be there. But then, the energy shifted. Subtly, quietly. Then, all at once, Whoopi Goldberg, known for asking bold and sometimes controversial questions, decided to go deeper. At least in her words. She began gently, asking about Michael's evolving career, the changes in Hollywood, and whether he ever felt pressured to remain in the spotlight. Michael answered every question respectfully and thoughtfully. But Whoopi wasn't done. With a serious expression, she leaned forward, looked him directly in the eyes, and asked, "Michael, do you ever feel like the industry keeps you around because of sympathy?" A question so sharp, so unexpectedly personal, that it sliced through the air like a blade. The studio froze. The audience's clapping stopped instantly. Even the cameras seemed to pause. Michael blinked slowly, almost as if making sure he'd heard her correctly. His smile faded. His posture stiffened. It was the kind of silence that doesn't just fill the room, it squeezes it. For a split second, it looked like Michael might let it go, laugh it off, or deflect with one of his classic one-liners. He had done so hundreds of times throughout his career, turning uncomfortable moments into humorous ones. But this time, something deep inside him shifted. He took a breath and said calmly, but firmly, "Sympathy. I think I'm here because I earned my place, Whoopi." A powerful sentence. Controlled, sharp, but respectful. Yet Whoopi didn't stop. She leaned even closer, doubling down on the very point that had clearly hit a nerve. "I mean, people admire you, Michael," she insisted. "But you've faced challenges. Do you think the industry treats you differently?" The tension skyrocketed. Michael's eyes narrowed just slightly. His jaw tightened. His voice, when he replied, was steady but firmer than before. "Challenges don't define my work," he said, "and they don't give anyone the right to question my value." The audience reacted instantly. Soft wave of gasps and whispers filled the studio. Joy Behar looked from Whoopi to Michael with wide, nervous eyes. Sunny Hostin shifted in her seat, clearly sensing where this was heading. Even the stage crewed, usually silent, invisible, and felt the shift. A few leaned forward. Someone behind a camera whispered, "Oh boy." Under their breath. Michael wasn't raising his voice. He wasn't being rude, but he was drawing a boundary in the clearest way possible. And Whoopi, instead of backing off, she looked unsettled, maybe even defensive. Her brows tightened just slightly, as if she didn't expect him to challenge the premise of her question so directly. But what she didn't realize, what no one realized, was that her question had touched a deeply personal nerve for Michael. He'd spent years proving that his condition didn't define him, didn't limit him, and definitely didn't allow people to treat him like a charity case. So when Whoopi pushed him into that corner, even unintentionally, he reacted exactly the way someone with decades of resilience behind them would, with honesty, with pride, and with zero tolerance for disrespect. The temperature in the studio changed. The interview's tone changed, and everyone watching, even those at home, could tell that something between Michael and Whoopi had just snapped. No jokes, no smiles, no friendly Hollywood talk, just raw tension growing by the second. And that tension was about to explode. By now, the atmosphere inside the View studio felt like it was vibrating. You could practically see the tension hanging in the air, thick, uncomfortable, and ready to burst at the smallest spark. What had begun as a mild disagreement was quickly transforming into one of the most combustible moments ever captured on live daytime television. Whoopi Goldberg, known for her bold opinions and no-nonsense attitude, attempted to steady the ship. She lifted her hands slightly, as if physically calming the situation, and said, in a firm but controlled tone, "Look, Michael, I'm just being honest. We talk about what people think. It's part of the job." But Michael J. Fox wasn't buying it. He didn't lean back. He didn't soften. Instead, he leaned forward, placing both hands on his knees as he stared directly at her. His voice was steady, but every word carried weight. "There's honesty," he said slowly, "and then there's disrespect. I came here to talk about my work, not be judged for my condition." A wave of tension swept across the studio. The audience shifted in their seats, unsure whether to clap, gasp, or stay silent. A few audible whispers broke through the stillness. Whoopi blinked, surprised, perhaps even offended that he challenged her so directly. And then she made the mistake that turned the disagreement into an out-loud confrontation. With a dismissive wave of her hand, she said, "Michael, relax. It's just a question." That single sentence hit Michael like a spark landing on gasoline. He gave a small, incredulous laugh, one without humor, then shook his head slowly. "Just a question," he repeated. The studio lights reflected off his expression. No longer warm or playful, but sharp, focused, and unmistakably serious. "Questions matter," he continued. "The way you ask them matters. The intention behind them matters. And that question wasn't curiosity, it was an insult." A few people in the audience gasped. One woman in the second row covered her mouth. Joy Behar leaned backward in her chair, whispering to Sarah N., "This is going off the rails." Her voice barely audible to the microphones. Behind the cameras, producers suddenly sprang into motion. One pointed at the control booth. Another ripped off his headset and spoke urgently into a handheld radio. They knew everyone knew that this moment was seconds away from turning into a viral disaster, but Michael was not finished. Looking directly at Whoopi, he added, "I've spent decades proving myself in this industry. I've worked harder than most people realize. I don't need sympathy, and I sure don't need to justify my worth on national television." His voice was calm, but the intensity behind it made the entire room feel like it had shrunk. Whoopi, feeling her authority challenged, tightened her jaw. She leaned in as well, refusing to look away. "This is The View, Michael. We talk about real issues. We don't sugarcoat things." Michael didn't hesitate for even a heartbeat. "Then let's talk about respect." He fired back immediately. A stunned hush fell over the entire set. Even the overhead microphones seemed to stop humming. At that point, it was no longer an interview. It wasn't even a debate. It was a collision to powerful personalities, two different philosophies, two different expectations of what the conversation was supposed to be. And the collision was happening live. Unscripted, unedited, and impossible to stop. Joy folded her arms and looked at the floor. Sunny Hostin stared at the desk, avoiding eye contact. Sarah kept glancing toward the producers, waiting for some kind of signal, but there was none. Everyone in that studio, hosts, staff, and audience felt the same thing. This was a moment that would be talked about for years. The energy in the room wasn't just tense, it was explosive, volatile, and seconds away from detonating in a way that neither the hosts nor the producers could control. And the worst part, the argument was nowhere near finished. What happened next was something daytime television had never prepared for. The tension between Michael J. Fox and Whoopi Goldberg had already reached boiling point. But no one realized just how close the show was to falling apart completely. The air felt heavy. The studio lights suddenly seemed far too bright. And every single person watching, whether in the audience or behind the cameras, felt the same question rising in their minds: is this really happening? Live? The producers certainly thought so. And they knew they had seconds, maybe less, to stop the situation from turning into a full-blown disaster. Behind the cameras, hands were waving frantically. Stage managers were signaling. The director was shouting through the headset. And a couple of crew members looked like they were genuinely unsure whether to step in or freeze. The entire control room was in meltdown mode, scrambling for a solution as Michael and Whoopi stared each other down at the table. Finally, one producer made the call. A crew member rushed onto the stage, with cameras rolling, something that almost never happens unless there's an emergency. The audience gasped loudly, realizing instantly that this was no ordinary moment. The crew member leaned down beside Michael, whispered urgently in his ear, and waited. Michael listened quietly, nodded once, then took a deep breath, and then, he stood up, slowly, calmly, but with an expression that told the entire world that a line had been crossed. The entire studio fell silent. Even Whoopi, who had been holding her ground moments earlier, seemed stunned as she watched him slide his chair back and reach for his jacket. She tried to speak, maybe to explain, maybe to smooth things over, maybe even to apologize, but she got only one word out before Michael turned sharply toward her, with his eyes locked on hers. He said, in a voice that held no anger but absolute disappointment, "If this is how guests get treated, then, I'm done." No shouting. No theatrics. Just a clear final statement, and with that, Michael J. Fox walked off the set. The reaction was instant and explosive. The audience gasped again, some covering their mouths, others whispering to one another. A few even stood halfway up from their seats, unsure whether to clap for him, or wait to see what happened next. The co-hosts were frozen in shock. Sunny Hostin stared wide. Sarah N mouthed, "Oh my God." Joy Behar tried to keep the show alive, forcing a tight, nervous smile as she leaned toward the camera. "Well, that was unexpected," she said, clearly trying to hide her own disbelief. But the damage couldn't be hidden, not even by quick camera cuts. The director immediately ordered a transition, and the show smashed into a sudden commercial break far earlier than planned. The iconic View music played awkwardly over a black screen, the production desperately trying to regain control. But backstage, everything was far from under control. Sources later revealed that Michael was visibly upset, telling producers he felt ambushed, misjudged, and deeply disrespected. He made it crystal clear that he wouldn't return to The View, not now. Not ever. Meanwhile, Whoopi stayed in her seat for several minutes after the break started, staring at the table, her face tight and unreadable. Some crew members approached her, but she waved them off, looking more frustrated than angry, like she knew this moment would follow her for a long time, and she was right. By the time the episode ended, social media had exploded. Clips of Michael walking off were spreading like wildfire, millions of views in minutes. Twitter, X, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, every platform was flooded. Headlines erupted across the internet. Michael J. Fox walks out of The View after heated on clash. Tensions explode between Michael J. Fox and Whoopi Goldberg live. Producers forced to intervene as interview turns hostile. What was meant to be a friendly celebrity interview had turned into one of the most shocking live TV meltdowns of the year, and for The View, this was the kind of chaos nobody saw coming and nobody would forget. The fallout from Michael J. Fox's dramatic walk-off was unlike anything The View had experienced in years. As the broadcast ended and the cameras stopped rolling, the internet was already on fire. Within minutes, hashtags like #MichaelJFox, #TheViewMeltdown, and #WhoopiClash began trending across multiple platforms. Viewers weren't just reacting, they were choosing sides, debating ethics, and demanding accountability. Hollywood, always quick to respond to controversy involving one of its most respected names, erupted almost instantly. A well-known actor tweeted, "Michael J. Fox is a legend. He deserves respect always." His message gained hundreds of thousands of likes within hours, turning into one of the biggest supportive waves of the day. A famous director chimed in shortly after, asking about sympathy. "That's not journalism. That's provocation. Do better." Celebrities, talk show hosts, and even former View guests jumped into the conversation, many of them openly criticizing the tone of the interview. Some shared their own experiences, hinting that Michael wasn't the first guest to feel cornered or pressured on the show. But the loudest voices came from the fans. Thousands of comments flooded social media. Michael handled himself with class. Whoopi crossed the line today. The View owes him an apology. Disability is not a joke topic, he deserved better. Some viewers went even further, calling for an on-air apology, demanding a formal statement from ABC, and urging the network to retrain the panel on sensitive topics. Fan-made videos analyzing the moment exploded across TikTok and YouTube, with titles like Michael J. Fox deserved more respect and The View needs to be stopped. For Michael's supporters around the world, his walkout wasn't a moment of weakness, it was a moment of strength. It was a reminder that even beloved celebrities with decades of experience can be pushed too far, and that respect should never be negotiable. To them, Michael didn't leave because he was offended. He left because he refused to let anyone diminish his legacy or turn his health into a spectacle. Meanwhile, inside the studio, tensions were reportedly even worse than what the audience saw on screen. According to insiders, producers were shaken. Some feared the backlash could become a long-term problem for the show's reputation. Others believed the interview could trigger discussions about changing the show's format, questioning boundaries, or even adjusting the way certain hosts approached sensitive topics. Sources claimed that several producers urged Whoopi to make a public statement to control the damage. Others warned that staying silent might make things worse. The atmosphere behind the scenes was described as chaotic, panicked, and divided. Fans of The View also voiced concern not just for Michael, but for the show itself. They questioned whether the long-running program had crossed a line that daytime television should never cross. Some argued that the show had grown too confrontational, while others claimed the incident could become a turning point for how celebrity interviews are handled moving forward. But one thing was clear across every platform. This wasn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. This wasn't a simple disagreement or a harmless debate. This was a moment that exposed the delicate balance of live television, the unpredictability, the raw emotions, and the consequences of crossing personal boundaries on air. Michael J. Fox didn't say much publicly afterward, but he didn't need to. His actions spoke louder than any interview, any response, or any apology. He walked out with his dignity intact, his voice unwavering, and his legacy, UNTARN, ISHED. And for millions of viewers watching around the world, that walkout became more than a dramatic TV moment. It became a powerful statement. Because in that moment, Michael J. Fox didn't just leave The View, he left as the hero of the story.